On a day in Minnesota, the tragedy occurred. May 25th, 2020 turned out to be cursed. In a Minneapolis street, the spirit of hatred came alive. In Powderhorn, the world would change forever in our sight. A man named George Floyd was a black American man who walked into a deli with a $20 bill in his hand. And he bought some cigarettes and went quietly on his way. But the clerk in rage called 911. The bill was counterfeit, they say. After that, it didn't take long for the police to track him down and took George into custody without proving charges found. So he kicked and screamed the best he could and tried to make his case. But the officer then slammed him down, prostrate on the ground. The arresting officer was a white American man, and the brutal force he used on George was no doubt a mortal sin. He knelt on George's neck with all his weight bearing down, while George cried for help, suffocating, trying to make a sound. George said, "I can't breathe," and begged for mercy and air. But the officer knelt for 9 more minutes like he didn't even care. But what really made this horrific scene different than the rest was the whole incident was caught on camera for the world to assess. When the video made the nightly news, all the country was enraged at the injustice done to George in such a hateful way. And the racism that was so clear and obvious to all had shocked the system to the core. This was the final straw. Oh, you're a hero, George Floyd. Well, you didn't know it then, but the silence you destroyed has made America wake up and stand for that we won't accept racial hatred anymore. From the day that George was murdered, the country was enthralled with hopes that this great tragedy would bring a change once and for all. So the black community rallied and spoke out in one voice, condemning police brutality. The courts now had to make a choice. Now they charge the offending officer with murder, 3rd degree, and also charge the assisting officers a appropriately. But the justice that was promised by attorneys and magistrates would be delayed and caught up in the courts, and the people couldn't wait. So the crowds began to protest in all the city streets. Across the country there was now a movement of uniformity. But soon that peaceful spirit was broken tragically by the emergence of violence in the crowd that rose up suddenly. And then all hell broke loose when the anger caught on, and the looting and the riots would be the story from now on. So the president called for order and deployed the military to contain the crowds from breaking laws and disturbing the public peace. In about a week or so, the peaceful protests had returned, and the larger message wouldn't be lost on the vandals and buildings burned. And the protesters were stronger now with a more righteous intent. Standing for racial equality was the message being sent. Oh, you're a hero, George Floyd. Well, you didn't know it then, but the silence you destroyed has made America wake up and stand for that we won't accept racial hatred anymore. Oh, you're a hero, George Floyd. Well, you didn't know it then, but the silence you destroyed has made America wake up and stand for that we won't accept racial hatred anymore. So now that the issue's been burned into everyone's brain, that changes had to be made moving forward in the public domain. And the levers of the government machine would now have to be pulled to change the current system and the new values to uphold. Now every level of society will have to keep in mind that 400 years of oppression is far too much time, and the pain of the black experience would no longer be ignored by the silent white majority who could finally help one accord. Making sure all peoples of color are awarded equal worth, and a new life of love and liberty could now be given birth. So it's up to us to make this dream, what seems like common sense, come true. I'm optimistic that people's hearts can heal and be made new. But I'd also like to stress the point that not all police are bad in this way. There are plenty of kind-hearted officers that serve this country night and day. And the respect I have for these men and women will never fade, even if a disgraced group of them fall off the cliff into the fray. So to my beloved country, don't let this chance pass you by, to begin to right the wrongs of the past and make the evil die. And the prejudice that may live in you will never have a place in the best world that we now could build with the help of God's grace. Oh, you're a hero, George Floyd. Well, you didn't know it then, but the silence you destroyed has made America wake up and stand for that we won't accept racial hatred anymore. Oh, you're a hero, George Floyd. Well, you didn't know it then, but the silence you destroyed has made America wake up and stand for that we won't accept racial hatred anymore.